Awake from shadows, rise from night, embrace the dawn, reclaim the light. No longer bound by hate-filled views, stay woke to the path that's true to you.
Join us in kicking off Holy Week Uprising on April 4th at 7 p.m. on Afro-American TV on YouTube for the Culture to Thrive podcast. Stay woke. Power to.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Marlon Solomon, your host. Very excited to have you here today, and we're looking forward to a great episode. So yes, I've been here waiting for a long time, but before we get started, hit the like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and let's get started with this podcast. Right? So, as you know, this beginning of Holy Week Uprising, and marks the 57th year that the good Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. This whole Holy Week Uprising was such a huge deal, right? Because without this whole thing started, without him getting assassinated, then there was a big uprising. Without the big uprising, there is no way to get the passage of the last of his civil rights acts, the 1968 Civil Rights Fair Housing Act. So welcome. We're very excited to get this, get started with this product. Like I said, I can't tell you how long it was that I've been trying to have this conversation. What's going on? Okay. All right. So I've been trying to have this conversation forever. It's just been like so much going on in the community today. They're attacking DEI. They're attacking African American history. Here at the African American Academy, we don't play that. We are, the leaders and taking a lot of our stories and putting them into digital storytelling, making tours, doing all kinds of stuff. So before we get started, we have two events coming up. One, in the work that we do here is the Lives With Me Heritage Program. That is our, it's how we give away a free DNA test to African Americans every year as part of we'll be giving a presentation to the City of Boston Task Force. We're very excited. We're inviting everybody to come out and support this program that connects people with their culture. And then, of course, to wrap up Holy Week Uprising at the historic Wally's Jazz Cafe for 57 after Martin. We're going to have a tour series. In fact, I got a ad that I made, so I'm going to play that for you guys. It's been 57 years since we lost the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to an assassin. We ask you to join us in this reflection of probably one of the more influential weeks in African American history. 7 days that literally changed the trajectory of America forever. This was called Holy Week Uprising because it happened around Easter. This is when cities all across America are in grief and protest. But out of all of that grief and protest, a new day was born. There was progress. The Fair Housing Act that was in the Congress was stalled, was passed 7 days later, April 11, 1968, officially ending redlining and segregation for everyone. So join us this Easter season. We have a couple of podcasts on April 4th and April 11th. Please check us out. Subscribe to Afro-American TV on YouTube. And then on the 19th, we're going to be at the historic Wally's Jazz Cafe. We're going to watch a little bit of the Red Line Narratives documentary we got. Have a community discussion. There's tours in the morning by my main man, Colin Knight of Live Like a Local Tour Boston. We got great food by Papa B's Barbecue. What else do you need, right before the end of Easter? So we hope to see you. This is more about history. This is all about the culture. So stay woke. Power to the people. Yes, 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 57. Yes, yes, yes. That's how we get down. So, I've been worrying about this whole thing about getting woke, and um, I decided that look, I've got to break this thing out because the word is being attacked. The word, it should not even be in the people in people's mouths. It's such a sacred word. So, when you think about the word work, woke, and the origin of the word, you have to really kind of go into its history. So I was able to find this wonderful Instagram, and I'm really going to be doing a lot of this. We're going to be looking at a lot of what's going on. And I want to also support a lot of our local African American history. The vast majority of African Americans, they're learning a lot of this stuff online, right? So, like, it's not like we have any structure, which is what African American culture needs to do. So, when you think about staying woke is like supporting some of these information. So, let us um, let me start it again.
Latest phrase for black apparently is DEI. Before that, it was woke. But true to form, these terms are now being thrown around without knowing what they truly mean. We do, though. Let's start with woke. Maybe it isn't socially acceptable to say the N word with a hard R anymore. But that sure as hell doesn't stop unredeemed colonizers from finding new ways to insult black folks. And because they have no imagination, they steal our words instead. We've always used a special language to communicate with each other. We had to keep safe. Woke, coined by Marcus Garvey in 1923, was one such word. From the 1940s through the Civil Rights Movement, as white terrorists used any way to hurt our community, the phrase stay woke was a way to tell our people to stay awake and aware of the dangers around us. Since then, triggered pundits have intentionally warped the meaning of woke into a slur. Everything from the Black Lives Matter movement to anything involving diversity, equity, and inclusion is woke. Like other elements of black culture, woke has been appropriated and distorted. Regardless of how racists try to weaponize our own words against us, it's essential to know the history of our language and to stay woke, especially when attacks are coming from all sides. We all know schools aren't teaching black history correctly.
That's exactly the point, right? Schools are not teaching our black history correctly. So big shout out to We Are Push. I think that they're just a wonderful We Are Push Black. They're a wonderful site. Please check them out. Please follow these accounts. These are the people, these are the historians that not only are they finding the history, but they're linking into where our young people can get this information. So you can hear what she said about woke. It's kind of it's a word that is sacred. And if you notice, she did start off the conversation using the N word. And I'm going to say it, nigger, all right, with the hard R, right? And the reason why that word is, why woke is being attacked, in my opinion, looking through the cultural view, is that you have a situation in which that word represents a freedom, right? A freedom from what, you may ask? A mental freedom. A mental freedom from what, ask? How about it's a mental freedom from the actual word nigger? All right? So, okay, Marlon, where are you going with this? So, the word nigger, as we already know, is a word that was used derogatory against African Americans. But it goes way deeper than that. It's not just about being, about the word and having that word, degrade you in a way. It's to make you mentally feel. It's to make you mentally feel as if you're inhuman. That is the purpose of the word. To turn a human being into a commodity in the mind. So the word is there. The N word is there. They're using on it for our African Americans for centuries, right? Telling you that you are not a full human being. you do not have the full range of attitudes and cares and wonders and likes and loves of your life. That there are even certain human emotions where you are not necessarily allowed to partake in. You can't be angry, you're the angry black man or the angry black woman. You can't be arrogant because, oh, you're an uppity Negro. How dare you? You can't even feel educated, right? And this constant reinforcement of inferiority was stamped with that word nigger. And it was done over and over and over again in the most cruelty of manner. And you know what? We as African Americans, we have to be real with ourselves, right? Some of us, not everyone can resist that. Some of us, even whether it's unbiasedly knowing or knowingly, we've accepted in some way, shape, or fashion when we say that, oh, I shouldn't speak up. I should be a good person and not say this. That's part of it, right? When we couch our language so that, we may be angry. We don't want to show we're the angry black person, right? These are the things that being like mentally enslaved really means. And when you think about generation after generation teaching people this kind of stuff, I remember, one of the things about the good Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was during a lot of the civil rights movement. If you look at a lot of what he's, his the recordings that are available, even on YouTube, you'll find him constantly trying to bring people like you're good, you're worthy, you are a human being. Don't let anybody tell you you're nothing. And I found that to be quite revealing. It just tells me that he knows that there's an epidemic of hopelessness growing within, and rightfully so. This is not because, this is centuries of degradation, centuries of second-class citizenship, watching your family and people you love and respect have to cowtail, go through the back entrance, be mistreated, spat on, killed, lynched, worse, even tortured. So when you now think about what that does intergenerationally, it is inherited in some fashions, even as a defense mechanism, right? Because if you're not a person who is really trying to, if you're a person that's really trying to come out of these feelings, really trying to understand, right? Where do you even start? And there now comes in the word woke. As our good friends at We Push Black boss said, Marcus Garvey, which as we all know, is a historic African American figure that fought for civil rights and back in his time, and he created it, right? In order to provide a mental doorway. It signifies awakening from being the nigger. It awakens us from being a commodity. It awakens us to being whole human beings, which is why the word is a sacred word. If we're going to take the N word back from, oh, white people can't say that no more, I think this is a word we need to really take back, because we can't sit here and act like we don't have people within our communities that are traumatized. And this is intergenerational trauma. right? To awaken from that intergenerational trauma is crucial to any sort of collective efforts that we're going to make in the future. And that's why they attack the word woke. They don't want you to be woke. They don't want you to awaken from being a nigger. They're not going to call you that no more, but they're not going to tell you, oh, we don't want you to awake. And that's what this whole battle is about. It's about getting us to not awaken. Okay, and now what? So we're now awaken to do what? Maybe that's the question we ask. So what are we waking for? To speak our minds, to speak truth to power. But maybe, because you see, a lot of what's going on today is a derivative of that. They're attacking DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're attacking education and African American history, trying to erase it from even the executive order to take away American history at the National Smithsonian for African American history. I mean, it baffles me. The Department of Education, why don't they want us to be educated? What is the threat? And maybe we can sit and say to ourselves, okay, it's because they don't want us to succeed. Maybe it's a little bit more than that. You see, I always start off my talks with a very important question that I ask my audience. I ask them, okay, so there's been a community that has been actively working to erase your history for centuries. Why would they continue it so long? Most likely because they've been very successful. And if they've been very successful, why are they? That means that they've erased things that we do not know. And if they've erased things that we do not know, then what don't we know that we are supposed to know? That's the question we need to ask. Pardon, yo. This is Hood Podcast. So what do we know that we do not, what don't we know that we need to know? That we're supposed to know? That's supposed to solve our problems? What don't we know? How we can't answer that question because of the successful efforts of racists and African American and racists against African American communities. So, staying woke means staying aware. It means knowing your surroundings, right? But if we're woke, we're going to ask for these things that we don't know. We're going to find them out. We're going to awaken to the truth. We're going to understand deep down what we do not know. And we're going to learn those things. We're going to get better at those things. And overall, this whole battle is because the more we know, the less exceptional America is. The more we tell our history is a direct contradiction to the Constitution of the United States of America and the idea of American exceptionalism. And if we erode that, if we say that, well, America's Constitution was broken from day one, and in fact, it is 57 years ago that actually gave America that final push in which we were able to finally say no more use of space and ethnicity and race in our housing so we can keep people living in different communities and keep others away from others and keep the infrastructural segregation that exists in this country today. And they don't want us to do that. And not only that, they don't want us, and please listen to this, they don't want us to have the moral authority to denounce all the craziness and the crimes against humanity that have done been done to our communities that have contributed to the trauma, the cultural erasure, and much, much more. Now, I mentioned infrastructure because it's very important that we understand that a lot of the equity starts there. Because one misconception, and we'll catch this on the other side of this clip, but one misconception is how much destruction of the community played, like, wait, hold on, let me say that again. It's like we overlook the effect of the urban renewal on our communities. We act like it's just a footnote, but it's far more than that. Officials marketed this destruction as urban renewal, masking slum clearance that benefited white suburbanites while displacing low-income and black urban residents. The 1968 assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sparked protests nationwide in what is known as Holy Week Uprising. At the end of the 7 days, the Fair Housing Act, the last of the civil rights acts attributed to the slain leader, passed on April 11, 1968, ending segregation and redlining in the United States. Unfortunately, the damage had already been done. Communities erased based on race, concrete foundations on neighborhoods are already in place. A common historical oversight is the effect urban renewal had on the civil rights movement. Legislation that gave African Americans protections against racism, rights to vote, housing protections were undermined by urban renewal demolitions because the communities who gave blood, sweat, and tears for centuries for equality were simply no longer in place to vote as African American districts laid in ruin, never forever to enjoy the newly found freedoms and make their collective voices heard. In Grove Hall, tensions erupted. Since mayor attempted to ease unrest, yet the damage had already been done. By then, North Dorchester, which was coded for African American in redlining maps, faced rapid decline. Yeah, that's a clip from our Redline Narratives, Lost Cultural Hubs of Boston. Fantastic clip there. And so one of the things that I definitely wanted to, talk about that clip was the idea that the communities were no longer in place once the communities were leveled to the ground in the 60s. This is a very important key fact. Now, if you know much about the history, you'll realize that African Americans actually had, for all intensive purposes, since the end of slavery nearly 100 years earlier, had basically recovered to the extent where they were able to push forward for the Civil Rights Acts. They were organized, they were living in their communities that they had lived in for now generations. And you had these little Wall Streets, little black Wall Streets, along what we call the Chitlin Circuit, all the way around the United States. And when these communities were destroyed, they never really got to vote. In those communities never got to vote because they were leveled to the ground. And that erased cultural locations, spaces, memories, dispersed people, and ultimately erased the progress that was made. And I think that's a very important fact when you think about what happened with the assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, was that was the apex of African American achievements at the time. And I know it's going to sound, well, what do you mean? Like they were living in segregation and things like that. But these were functioning communities. These were networks and social networks, and the communities were self-reliant and were able to create revenue autonomously because they had to, right? So you had actually healthier communities because they were insulated and just they had been there for long enough time. And awakening to that idea would allow us to ask for those kind of spaces again. After all, we were denied these spaces, and this was done based on race, which is unconstitutional. Especially in the city of Boston, we have no African American clusters of businesses, like a hub, like an African American Chinatown, and we did. That's why we do our events at Wally's, because Wally's is one of the last places that has these, that were one of the, so the area was full of jazz clubs back in the day. And, down the street, Tremont, and it was also like a little business, like downtown African American community. The Madison Park community was close by, the dentist, everybody was close by. So you can only imagine if those communities had been left alone, what would have happened, right? These are the things that they don't want you to wake to. These are the things that they don't want you to know. Because if you know that, then you have a different way of looking at the displacement today, which goes back to my case about moral authority. It's the moral authority. They still want to be the boss. And let me say who they are, because we're not talking about simply white people. No, that's not true. My work, in fact, does not have to do with race. This isn't about white people. Jewish people are white. They were not involved in enslaving anybody in the United States, right? The Eastern Europeans, the Italians, the Polish, the Irish, for the most part, nobody there is was doing any slavery. We're talking about white Americans descended from this country, of which one group, the Confederate culture, that is what they idolize. And cruelty is the point. The inhumanity is the point with this group. So remember, this is not a racial issue, for me anyway. I look at this as a culture. So there's a culture of hate. There's a culture of wrapping religion in with this, hate, and having to reconcile, one hand I go to church and I'm a Christian, and the second hand I can't stop committing crimes against humanity. So we've watched this group over time, mutate from slavery from a civil war. They defeated Reconstruction. In the 1920s, they started putting up a lot of cultural infrastructure around statues, things like that. And then they started teaching their kids this lost cause ideology. They grew up into McCarthyism. And then they were segregationists, black codes, redlining, urban renewal, the ultimate destruction of nearly every African American community in the United States in the 60s. And then we know what happens after the death of Martin Luther King, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. We go from church people who are just getting such a major victory as far as the Civil Rights Act is concerned, and within 10 years, all of a sudden, it's drugs and violence in our communities. But people often overlook the fact that the communities were leveled to the ground. That had no part to play, right? So, I'm urging everyone, don't let them say it. When they mischaracterize woke as LGBTQ rights, and of course, we want everyone to be fair, to have their rights, but this is sort of like civil rights, right? We have to understand that when you define civil rights, you have to look at civil rights as a way of technically getting equality, right? And when you try and get equality and you are negotiating this equality, you make some concessions. But the full breadth, the full extension of oneself, it cannot be achieved with the civil rights, right? You need cultural rights, and we need to protect certain things in our culture. We need to protect our cultural space. That is part of being woke, and that word is part of our cultural space. Nobody can appropriate it. Nobody can use it because this word is sacred. It signifies my people being able to transfer their mentality from being an object, from being a piece of property, from being sold, from being inhuman, subhuman, from being degraded and turning themselves just like a butterfly into a beautiful specimen of God. This is what they don't want us to know. This is the things that they're trying to get us to stop. Now, if you guys have seen this, let me show you this next clip. It's quite I think it's a real cool one. It really goes to what a good articulation of what we've been through. Okay, we're having a little issue. There you go.
I mean, imagine you go all around the world and smash up everything that other civilizations built, loot what they built, pillage, steal, even steal their ideas and their concepts and their philosophies, and then you sit on top of this stolen goods and declare yourself to be rich because of your own merit. And imagine telling this lie to your children, to your own children, to your grandchildren, generation after generation. How do you think that's going to go? You didn't invest in creating actual merit. You cheated, you lied, you stole, you brutalized. And then you tell your own people that everyone else in the world has nothing and you have everything because of how much better you are than everyone else. How long is that lie sustainable? I mean, these are people who actually have civilizations, who actually created and built and accomplished and didn't just pillage and plunder. And there's still those people today, even though you have oppressed them, there's still those same people. And you're still the way you are. I mean, a good example actually is African Americans. I don't know if you can think of a people who were more held back, more deprived, more sabotaged than African Americans. You took everything away from them and took them away from everything. They started in your country at less than zero, literally regarded and treated as subhuman, not allowed to learn to read or write or anything for hundreds of years. But you see, they come from a people of accomplishment to one degree or another, not a people of piracy and theft and appropriation. They come from a people who created and built and developed in their own country, in their own land. And even though you did everything that you could possibly do to suppress them, to hold them down, to hold them back, and you're still doing that until today, nevertheless, I don't think anyone can dispute the fact that African Americans have become a global cultural superpower. And people like this, with a history like this, with a legacy like this, simply cannot be held back for any length of time by a people who do not have a similar history, people who have never actually invested in their own civilizational development. And that's the West.
Right. So, I mean, there you have it. I mean, I don't think it was more eloquently said. And it goes to what I'm trying to say about the moral authority. It's huge, right? If, like, people can't be telling us what should be doing, what we should be doing, who should be doing what, why we should be doing this. And if we don't understand that, then that's how we're going to have more and more problems in our community. We need to understand that. So, they're attacking DEI, they're attacking education. Right? They don't want Black history. They're scrubbing websites of Jackie Robinson. These are the harms that are being done to a community that has been culturally disadvantaged and the history done for nearly 400 years. So we have a big job ahead of us. And without this job, there is nothing... there's very little we're going to be able to do if we don't start correcting these important factors. Okay, so the main thing We have to identify who the enemy is. Okay? I'm very clear on this a lot of times that when we think about, we're thinking about Confederate culture. And please don't mix this up with being a Republican. All right? It's very important. The Republicans, when I think of Republicans, I'm thinking about John McCain, Mitt Romney, Charlie Baker, in fact, two of those are former Massachusetts governors. Um, you know, uh, John Kasich. There are many of them. Liz Cheney. I'll even throw Mike Pence in there for what he did on January 6th. But we're talking about people who are American, but they're conservative, which is fine. We do need two healthy cultural viewpoints, right? One from the more liberal progressive, the other from the conservative, which is fine because we're all following the Constitution. The issue comes with this other group, the Confederate culture. And this Confederate culture, as their ancestors were, these group of people, they're very hateful, they are very heartless, and they do not care about human beings. They care about making money, being in power. And they don't want us to have our moral authority because if all the history is told, they can't tell us a damn thing. So that's why they don't want us to know our history. They don't want us to unify. Culture is a very big unifier. In fact, it's the only thing I've found that unifies people. Imagine if I had, like when you're having an event and you invite people over and you tell them there's going to be food because food is cultural, right? And if you put that food out, people show up, right? It's because of the recipe, right? We know the recipe, it brings us together. We've agreed that chicken is good as a community. And that's what we got to do today. We've got to stay woke, right? We've got to maintain our cultural integrity, which means ensuring that we can identify that we're not talking about white people. Okay, please, this is not a white or black issue. This is a culture, just like in the black community. All right? In the black, we're not talking about, when I say black, I mean all black people. Brazilians, Nigerians, African Americans, wherever, right? Black people, right? From Africa, from South America, everywhere, Caribbean, black people. When I say African Americans, I'm talking about African Americans that were descended from slavery here in the United States. Not slavery in Jamaica, not slavery in Haiti or Brazil, or not people that were colonized in Africa. I'm talking about African Americans. And that unique history is a beautiful one. It's a resilient one. But we are now relegated to not having a lot of these history in our community. And I think people just look at culture and don't understand the cultural economic factors behind it, which is another thing they don't want us to know, which is the woke part. These cultural artifacts, these things we learn, these things we practice, right? From recipes that we learn, each culture has a cultural cookbook. Each culture has a cultural list of names. And each culture has recipes, a cultural cookbook, cultural name list. There are a lot of things that we get in our culture. And these things, these artifacts, this piece of information, or like in African Americans, we are great at playing guitar and playing instruments. That's our cultural skill. And we use that cultural skill to produce products and services in our community, right? Whether it's a bar or a restaurant or clothes or, whatever it is that our cultural skills are. And we use this to create cultural revenue. So to not have these cultural artifacts in abundance, there's actually an economic component. We can't create revenue for ourselves, similar to maybe like a Nigerian or a Haitian restaurant, And like I said, in African American, we don't have many restaurants. Even the food, when you think of the food, it's derivative of being slaves, right? Which is, makes the food, it is the food, what it is, and that's our culture, and we're proud of the resilience, but also their nutritional, it's not as nutritious in some ways because the food is born of slavery, not born of this culture, and navigating, lands and creating your own recipes as many other cultures do. They don't want us to know that being woke means that some of the traditions that maybe we've lost. And these traditions could be parades, which bring money into our community. These traditions could be the Negro Leagues. These are also things that we did regularly, right? The jazz clubs, all these different ways of making money that bring the community together, right? Form that cultural hub, like an African American Chinatown, right? Where everything is African American, right? These are the culture to thrive components that we're talking about. And without a collective understanding of what's missing, what's there, what has been harmed, what is going fantastic, what have we salvaged, then, we can never awaken. We can never be whole, right? Until we start building these, we get communities built to our design, to harness our skill sets and make the most money in our communities. As African Americans, the road will be very tough. We have to come together, and we're not going to come together. You can't make people come together. People have to be drawn together, which means we have to remember our shared cultural experiences and come together under those contexts and pretenses and do the work, right? Do the work of our ancestors, do the work of our elders, but do it in new ways today. So if it's storytelling, how are we storytelling? How were they storytelling back then? Oh, great. So if they were storytelling back then, let me storytell today. Right? There were a lot of people that owned like real estate, and there were a lot of people that owned hotels, right? That's an industry. How do we get that industry? We had a music industry, right? That was, a bunch, series, a network of clubs, like I said, called the Chitlin Circuit. All these things are the things that we need to reinvest ourselves in. The church was another building that was, let me, so let me go on this, all right? So, we believe at the African American Academy that cultural rights is the next phase, the next level, the full appreciation for African Americans born of African Americans of American slavery, right, to achieve. Like civil rights, it will, once applicable to the African American community, we believe that just like the civil rights, everyone will enjoy. But only the African American community has this key that can unlock it because of its situation, its historical pretext of being called 3/5 of a person by, the community, to be 3/5 of a person by the Constitution, the historic, cultural erasure. I'm sure everybody remembers that Kunta Kinte scene from Roots. We can go on and on into the cultural erasure. In fact, before Biden left office, President Biden left office, he did give an apology to Native Americans, who are the only group of African Americans that did not ask to be American, right? So African Americans, Native Americans, we didn't ask to be American. Some people say Mexican Americans, which is true to some extent is true, but to most extent, when we have this discussion, it's African Americans and Native Americans that did not get this ability to actually sign up to be American, right? We were forced to be American. And the cultural erasure that the Native Americans experience, I think, is important to talk about because it really goes into the fact that because it's documented. They even had schools. We were not even given schools to deculturalize us, right? And I think the factor is that the Native Americans were on their native land, so it's just more difficult to erase culture because they're on their homelands, and African Americans were not on their homelands. So I often say African Americans are the only people in the face of humanity, in the history of humanity, to not be able to point to their cultural homeland. Not saying you know where it is and you've been pushed out or whatever. I'm talking about you don't literally have the cultural memory of where your people originated from because of the slave trade, being sold, and things like that. And I often say that, you see, that's cultural rights. The understanding you have a right to the cultural lands, you have the cultural history, you have your cultural language, you have these cultural rights that have been now, after all these centuries, we cannot articulate what those rights are because we don't have the cultural memory. We don't know what all the names are in the cultural names. You don't know any names. That's why Malcolm X called himself X, because that name is a slave. We don't know. Remember, what did I say? What do we know that we do not know? So, no, what do we need to know that we do not know? So the idea now is, okay, we have to look and see how do we fill in these cultural gaps because no human being is operating without this knowledge except for us. And this is where the cultural rights comes in. So look at it like this. If civil rights, right, it's like a civil marriage. You go into a courthouse, right? You sign a document, you're married, right? Bada bing, bada boom, you're married, all right? No ceremony, no none. But let me tell you what, you go to any woman, self-respecting woman, and say, hey, babe, I love you. I gotta get married to you. Let's go to the court. Bada bing, bada boom, it's done. She'd be like, are you crazy? You gotta meet my father. You gotta meet my family. We gotta plan the wedding. I need my ring. I need my white dress. I need the She's asking for culture. She wants the full kit and caboodle. That's what we're asking for as African Americans now. We're asking for the right to understand where we come from, to have a cultural homeland, to have cultural spaces that are revered, to have cultural infrastructure, to have a cultural hub, to have a community similar to the communities that were leveled to during the urban renewal. That's what we're looking for. No more civil rights talk. We have to change the narrative. Okay? Civil rights was actually a religious movement. It was not a civil movement, but that is the way white people saw it because they were looking at it from the outside. But to us, it was a religious movement. How do you know? Because the fundraising, you know how they got that? A lot of it was through like people like Aretha Franklin and church, they're paying you 10% on Sundays, right? Aretha Franklin and the music, right? She would fundraise. The planning for a lot of civil rights actions happened within churches, right? So, think of even what was targeted by some of the KKK, were bombing of churches, right? The church was the rock. Those churches were leveled during the urban renewal. So you had a situation where communities were being hollowed out. It's about social networks, about knowing who people, living next to people that you've lived your whole entire lives. And these cultural rights is what we need to fight for, which is why I'm saying we should stay woke. All right? Their words, we need to protect the word work. We need to protect the word reverend in the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I mess up. I say Dr. Martin Luther King, and I have nothing against him being a doctor or PhD holder. But that title is given to him by Boston University. It's not given to him by his people. And when we cut off the main driving force behind the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King that led him, 57 years old, to meet his untimely death, we have to put the fact that his religion was the core of why we got our civil rights. His faith in his God was the core reason. So we have to honor him in death the way he honored himself in life, which was, if I just find it hard to believe if the Reverend Doctor was here today that he would say, okay, you know what? I'm not a pastor, I'm a civil rights leader. No, he would tell you he's a reverend. So we call him Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Please always try to say that. That's part of the culture to thrive. These changing of narratives, say words that are more affirming to our people. These are the woke ideas that they don't want you to know. They don't want us to teach our children this because that's going to erode the moral authority of their children. Brothers and sisters, we got a long way to go. And, a lot of the backstabbing, we have a lot of cultural pollution within our communities that we've got to flush out. And I hope that we're ready to take those kind of hard looks at ourselves because we are harboring things. I don't think if people really understood what the N word meant, they would not call themselves niggas. I really believe that. And I know, I grew up in the hip hop era, in the 80s and 90s. That's when it started. So, it's not like I didn't grow up saying it. But as I grew older and understood, as I awakened from being a nigga, I started to embrace that this word. And I'm not going to say I don't say it, but, because it's just part of my life. I've been saying this since I was 13. But I've awakened to understand that that word is harmful, that we've internalized it and we're saying it as a point of endearment. We can say that it makes ourselves feel good, that we got the word. They don't have to say it. We say it. That's power. That's not the kind of power I want. I want the power, take away the word that they should not use woke, to talk about, and I'm not saying other groups don't need help, and we're there to support other groups. So that's why everybody benefits from the Civil Rights Act, or the Voting Rights Act, or the Fair Housing Act, or any other act that the African American community has sacrificed so all the immigrants who are in this country can enjoy. And that is the gift. But please put the ancestors that fought for that. Put our ancestors that fought for that and gave their lives for that. Give them the due that they have earned and never got. And I want all y'all to stay woke. I don't care where you come from. If you want to learn how to get woke, just learn about your own culture first. If you're Italian, go learn about when your people came here from Italy. If you're English, go learn about that. If you're Jamaican, if you're Ethiopian, if you're Nigerian, if you're Cameroon, if you're Ghanaian, or if you're from Brazil, if you're from England, wherever you come from, learn about your people and how they first came to America, and then you will just begin to awaken to understand the history, the strong history that African Americans have brought to this country and continue to bring. But the one thing we're not going to do, we're not going to be using the language and the narratives that have entrapped us and enslaved us for many long years. So don't be scared of that word woke. That word woke, the fact that they're jumping up and down for it, we've forgotten why they're jumping up and down for it. We just go, okay, they're crazy, they don't like us. No, it's because they know that that word is an opportunity corridor to happiness, to freedom, to the pursuit of happiness that is promised to us by the country that we have given our blood to. I call myself an African American, not because of my mom is African American, my dad is Nigerian, but because it is culturally appropriate to name yourself after a piece of land that my people come from. I don't know where they come from in Africa, right, on my mom's side. I don't know where they come from in Africa. But I do know they come from Africa, so I'm going to claim that land. I'm going to claim my cultural space. I'm not going to call myself black. Black is a color. I'm going to awaken from being black. I'm not a color. I'm a human being from that my people were brought from Africa enslaved, and they came and they built the country of America from the ground up. And we gave freedoms to people that came from all around the world because our people gave the sacrifice. Our ancestors did the hard work and gave their lives with allies for the freedom that all people that look like me, that sound like me, all communities of culture, it doesn't have anything to do with race. All communities of culture benefit from the sacrifice of Juneteenth to the civil rights movement, and everybody will benefit from cultural rights as well. But only our group has the key to unlock this constitutional nightmare that makes people think it's all right to hamper our cultural rights by telling us and making it difficult for us to know our history. It is our history. We have a right to it, and it is a cultural right. It's a human right. And people trying to take away our history is going to do nothing for this country. So I'm very, so I'm very thankful for everyone, joining us on this podcast today. I can't tell you, like I said, we're going to be having a lot more discussion on a lot of this work. I can't tell you how much more we're going to have, because I'm even going to probably be doing a little bit more. We're going to be talking about, this is the first real one. Like I said, I've been trying to do this for a longest time, y'all. I've been just working, trying to get the organization together. We've restructured. We are, quick shout out to all my students at African American Academy. We're starting our recruiting process. So we do this hard work. The 57 a.m. we're going to collect more stories about the African American community from people that lived it. We're going to convert those stories, those cultural artifacts, into digital storytelling, into tours, into curriculum, and systemized curriculum for all the youth of Boston. Just like the Boston Red Line narratives, Lost Cultural Hubs of Boston documentary that we made. So we want you to be involved, right? Support our organization. I'm telling you all, if we need to learn our history. We are building it now. We have the infrastructure to collect history and to create curriculum. So what are y'all waiting for? We need your support. If you don't support us, nobody's going to support us, because nobody values what we value. Okay? They don't value Holy Week Uprising, which is why we don't talk about Holy Week Uprising, even though it's so consequential. Right? So we're going to be teaching young people this summer. It's my favorite time of year. We've created 3 tours: New Guinea Joy, about North End and West End; Once Upon a Time in Nubian Square, which is about Lower Roxbury and the South End; and finally, Roadmap to a Beloved Community, which is about African American and Jewish American histories in the Dorchester, Blue Hill area. So we're going to be teaching our kids this, and of course they're going to be doing the podcast, because we're trying to bring people into a community, and we need social relevant young people, advocates. Check them out on, you can get it on the QR code. But yeah, we're the African American Academy. African American Culture Initiative Incorporated is our government name, and you've been a part of the Chop It Up not the Chop It Up podcast, that's my youth podcast, but the Culture to Thrive podcast. And we just want to wish all of you a happy, reflective Holy Week Uprising. We're going to see you next week at our next podcast, which is going to be called Legacy to Exclude, which is really about the Fair Housing Act and the redlining and how segregation, before that day, right, before 1968, right, it was legal to use infrastructure to contain people, create open air prisons. And this is this is why it's so important that we do this work, that we give voice to these kind of culturally relevant events and histories and stories, and then we teach the young people to do the same. So till next time. But yeah, be watching out, like, cause we're gonna be doing I'm gonna get clips, more clips, and we're gonna be really going over the day to day. We're going to go much more deep into the Confederate culture. I could only touch on it a little bit in this 1 hour, but we are going to look and analyze that culture. We're going to look at the multiculture that exists here in places like Boston and the North that have embraced multiculturalism. And we're going to discuss a lot of the cultural things that is going on. And we're very excited. Hope to see you April 14th at the City of Boston Reparations Task Force meeting. We're going to be delivering one of our projects for a community to give us our feedback. And then, of course, 19th at Wally's. We expect to see you there. It's going to be a great day. So thank you so much for watching the Culture to Thrive podcast. Like I said, I'm very excited about this. This is going to be real sweet. So until next time, stay woke. Power to the people, my brothers and sisters. See you next time. Culture to Thrive.